Today's episode is brought to you by Leeward Elite. Leeward Elite is the solution to your technology and computer needs. Don't you deserve a better technology experience, a worry-free experience, a cost-effective experience? Leeward Elite members enjoy peace of mind, greater business productivity, and unlimited support. That's right, unlimited support. Contact a Leeward Elite concierge at leewardelite.com. That's leewardelite.com. And folks, I've gotten to know the Leeward Group, and not only do they provide outstanding IT solutions, they're also a very socially conscious group. They give back to their community in so many ways. I highly recommend contacting Leeward for any of your IT or consulting needs. I thank them for sponsoring and hope you enjoy today's episode.
Looking to buy, sell, or grow your business to position it for a sale? As the owner and managing partner of Sun Acquisitions, Dominic Rinaldi has personally been involved in over 300 M&A transactions. He has seen and done it all, consulting with large and small businesses across a broad range of industries. On M&A Unplugged, he'll interview buyers, sellers, and their advisors about their experiences scaling, selling, and acquiring businesses. On every episode, you will get key learnings, but most importantly, you will be better prepared for your own acquisition or sale. This is M&A Unplugged with your host, Dominic Rinaldi.
Aaron Stahl is the president and CEO of P3 Cost Analysts. P3 is a national cost reduction franchise that focuses on saving businesses and governments money on their waste, telecom, and utility expenses. P3's current structure is the result of a merger and acquisition that Aaron completed in 2014 that brought together two companies focused on different sectors of the cost reduction industry. Aaron is a graduate of the University of Arkansas and has worked for himself since he was 21, starting, operating, and acquiring several businesses. Aaron is also a proud member of the Eagle Scout family. I imagine that an Eagle Scout training came in very handy in that picture I saw you climbing the volcano in Ecuador at almost 20,000 feet.
That's right.
Aaron, welcome to the M&A Unplugged podcast. And I'm curious, how has your Eagle Scout training prepared you for operating your own businesses?
Yeah, no, I appreciate appreciate being able to join today. Very excited. As far as the Eagle Scout training, wow, that was a lifetime ago, but it was a big achievement to get inside of the Boy Scouts of America organization. And I really have to credit my parents with helping me stick with it. My dad's an Eagle Scout, so is my brother. And I think more than anything, it just taught me at a very young age to learn to see things through to fruition and stick with it. You learn a lot of life skills in the Boy Scout program. So more than anything, I think it's just becoming a well-rounded individual and life skills and learning how to stick with things and see them through to the end.
Sounds like it gave you a sense of adventure as well. You're a pilot and you've traveled to something like 40 countries. Is that right?
That's right. I definitely have an intrepid spirit. I love traveling around the world. It's definitely one of my bigger hobbies. I fancy myself an adventure. I've done some pretty fun things in my life and learned to fly at age 18. I became a flight instructor a couple of years ago to teach friends and family how to fly. So any chance I get, I enjoy flying and traveling for sure. And actually in college, I did a study abroad program called Semester at Sea with actually one of my business partners was on that trip. 600 students went on a small cruise ship around the world in 100 days. We stopped at 10 different countries and took classes when the ship was en route between countries. So it was a pretty amazing experience. I highly recommend that to anybody with children out there. It's a lot more affordable than you would think. And it's
that sounds awesome. What an experience.
Yes.
So you started your own business at 21. Have you ever worked for anybody else?
I've had two jobs, really. One was working on my parents' farm, feeding the cows and doing odds and end jobs there. And then in college, I did some manual labor. And then a buddy of mine and I headed out to Montana for the summer, one summer in college, and I became a dishwasher on a guest ranch. And it was the worst job I've ever had. But other than that, I've really always been self-employed.
Well, I don't come across very many people that have really never worked for anybody else, have been entrepreneurs since an early age. So I'm really interested to hear about your journey and your story here. But before we get into that, could you talk just a little bit about P3, talk about the company, what you do today, and then we'll wind back to the beginning and then talk about the acquisition that you did that then now formed what is known as P3 Cost Analysts.
Absolutely. So today, P3 Cost Analyst, as you mentioned, we're a national cost reduction franchise. We focus on saving businesses, small and local governments money on their telecom, utility, waste, and actually merchant processing expenses as well. And we do it all on a risk-free basis. So if we can help our clients save money, we split the savings with them 50-50 each month. And if we can't, there is no fee. So it's a really, really great value proposition. And we just get out there and talk to C-level executives around the country and offer our services. We've got a lot of expertise and brain power in-house and people that have been doing this stuff, been doing this auditing in these industries for many, many years. I think we have over 100 years of combined expertise on staff. And anytime you have that amount of expertise and you focus on these niche categories, you're going to find opportunities for savings, whether it be errors, overcharges, et cetera. So that's kind of the 10,000 foot view of what we do and who we are. And we recently franchised the business. And so we're looking to grow that way and really scale going forward. We've got 6 franchisees to date, and we're actively bringing on other franchisees around the country.
So you didn't always operate as a franchise. So you were direct to the client. And what caused you to go the franchise route?
Well, previously, in the company that I started originally, P3 Waste Consulting, we had salespeople that we work with, and as most business owners know, it's hard to find good people that can go out and do business development. We were lucky in that we found a couple of good ones early on, but it was just really difficult to scale. And as we'll talk about more, part of this acquisition was acquiring a company that had kind of already figured out that secret sauce to having a sales force of business partners and affiliates that they worked with. And then going forward, it just made way more sense to franchise the concept under one brand and grow it that way. And that's really how we got to where we're at today.
So what does your ideal client look like? Are you going after SME clients, small business clients, or is it mid-market clients? Who's your ideal client?
I'd say mid-market is certainly where it's at for us. We don't really want to work with the Fortune 100. There's just too much red tape there, and it's not something that we've pursued. Not to say that if a friend of ours was the CFO of a big company, we couldn't help him out. It'd be amazing to work with. But as far as ROI on the time, getting out there, getting in front of business owners and C-level executives that can make these decisions quickly to engage our services on a risk-free basis, it's definitely the mid-market. We also work with small businesses, but I usually tell people anybody bigger than a mom and pop. We don't want single locations. So we're really looking for multi-locations, high volume single locations in really any industry. And we also work with small local governments, whether it be sheriff's department or a county or city. And usually those are smaller markets, again, just because of the red tape involved. So we're looking for counties and cities with 100 or 100,000 people. But again, we could work with the state of Texas or big places like that. It's just all about finding that sweet spot where you get in front of people and actually get a decision made quickly.
So let's wind back to the beginning now. How did you get into this business?
Yeah, so I actually in college started doing real estate, and I just caught the entrepreneurial bug at an early age. And it was 2003, I believe it was. And I convinced my dad to co-sign on some home building loans. And I found a guy that actually knew how to build houses, and we formed a partnership and did that for a little while. And I saw at least I'd like to say I saw the writing on the wall with the real estate boom. It kind of snuck up and bit me a little bit, but I knew I wasn't going to do that forever. So I started looking for other business opportunities. And there was actually a company out of Florida at the time that was training people to become experts in the waste industry. And there really wasn't anybody doing that in the Midwest. And so I bit the bullet and bought into that system and got trained and slowly built a book of business and became an expert in the waste and recycling industry, which I still do some of that today. From there, grew, hired some people, and for a while it was really more of a lifestyle business. And then in 2014, my business partner, and I have three business partners, bought in, and my employee at the time, I also gave him some shares, and he became a partner. And then our biggest salesperson bought in, and now the four of us created a partnership and really have been going 90 miles an hour since 2014 and adding new services as far as cost reduction categories. We went from waste and recycling to waste recycling, shredding, medical waste. And then we partnered with the company that we ended up acquiring a few years ago and added telecom and utility consulting. So that's really kind of the story in a nutshell, if you will.
Wow. So when you were first introduced into the waste industry, were you a franchisee of that company, or were you more an independent contractor and you were just building your own book of business?
It was really just an affiliation. So you would pay a fee, they would go train you, give you kind of the blueprint of how the business model works, and it was the shared savings model that really it kind of emerged from a single point in time. It seems like it's a small industry and everybody kind of knows each other. And the people that were doing this training, I've still got connections with a lot of people that have also done the similar training. But it was really just a blueprint, and they would teach you kind of the ins and outs of the waste industry, and then be on hand to support you as you grew your business, and then available to work together if there was a large partnership opportunity. They would handle those with us. But they actually are no longer, they don't exist anymore, and it's just a complete affiliation, and kind of got my foot in the door and started, and now we're yeah, just taking it from there.
You use the term lifestyle business. I hear that a lot. I see that a lot with people that we come across. They're really sort of running the business, for their own benefit. And then there's a switch sometimes that flips, and it sounds like it did for you, where you decided, you know what, I think I could build something bigger than a lifestyle business. What was it that caused you to, make that change? And then that usually comes with a pretty decent investment, or at least a, pretty decent change in how you do business.
Yeah, absolutely. So from 2004 when I started it to 2011, before partners bought in, it was really a lifestyle business. I mean, the first 3 years, I was actually pretty naive. I was only going after Fortune 100 clients, which was just silly in hindsight. And I went through a period of time where I didn't have much revenue, and I finally realized I needed to start small. Started landing some really good accounts and built up a nice revenue. I got to the point where I was making, I mean, candidly, I was making 150 grand, and I was really the only employee. And it wasn't too difficult to run, and I was young and in my 20s, and just kind of wanted a free nomadic lifestyle, which I was able to do, and finally take some of those vacations and travel the way I wanted to. So it was certainly the quintessential lifestyle business for a while. And then my one of my partners, CFO now, I actually had approached him in 2011 about just seeing what the company was worth. He was doing mergers and acquisitions in Dallas for a boutique investment firm. And so I approached him about that just because I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep doing it forever or sell the business. And also, I was really just curious. We talked about it, and he approached me about buying the company. And I told him, I was like, well, I'm not going to sell you the company outright. I don't think that'd be the right thing to do. There is a lot of expertise involved in this. You don't just become an expert in the waste industry overnight. So he ended up buying in to the business. And that's when the first employee I hired, I gave him some shares as well. And then sales guy wanted to buy in too. And so now we've got the four partners. And really, it was that inflection point where it went from becoming a lifestyle business to being a real business, and what it is today, to 15 employees and 30 total people working together, and really scaling it from here.
And are all the partners still actively involved in the business?
They are. One of the partners is actually a franchisee, so he's not on the payroll, so to speak, but he's still active, and he's actually the one that referred me to Strategic Coach, which is how you and I met. So he's very active, but he's not on the payroll. He just chips in and helps out and thinks big and inspires us when he can.
And how did it cause you to run the business differently at that point in time? Because things start to change, right? You're taking investors in. I'm assuming people paid in to become an investor, and now you've got to run the business differently. It's not solely for your benefit. What change
Sure.
did you have to make as the owner of that business to make that transition?
Yeah, I mean, it was night and day for me. Not sure if necessarily my partners noticed the difference, but for me, it was a massive change because again, I went from if things went belly up, it was on me. And I live a pretty conservative lifestyle, so I was never behind on paying the bills or anything. So it didn't keep me up at night as far as the success of the business because I didn't have a whole lot of people relying on me. And once they bought in, it was just night and day. I mean, I realized, okay, I've got people that depend on me. They really need to see a good ROI on their investment and their time. And then as we've grown and add more and more employees, obviously a lot of people depend on the success of the business. So it's changed dramatically in that regard, but it's changed for the better. I mean, we've created a real business versus one that is just a lifestyle business. And there's a lot of wealth that can be created there, job opportunities for employees, and obviously saving money for our clients around the country. The more we get the message out, the more people we help. So it's been a net positive, but it certainly has been a big change in the amount of work that I do and the way that I work.
Yeah, so I think you just touched on a key takeaway for the M&A Unplugged community. There are a lot of owners out there that are running really nice businesses and they're getting a nice living from it. But there's a big difference between running a lifestyle business and then switching to a business where you've got real infrastructure. The value of your business will go up exponentially, but it requires additional investment. You're going to have to run the business differently, maybe take in partners as Aaron did. So, but if you want real value somewhere down the road, changing from a lifestyle business to something that's got real scale and infrastructure really matters.
Absolutely. And I mean, I would tell people that are considering that, because I mean, if you're considering, it seems to be the cool thing to do these days to take on investor money or angel investors or a Series A round or all that sort of stuff. But I would tell people to think really seriously about what you actually want because it does change. It does change fundamentally. And if you have a lifestyle business that's working, then maybe hold on to it. If it's not working, that's a good time to sell to somebody that can roll you up into a real business and something that they're trying to grow to a bigger thing. But it is a big decision and one that people should take their time. And it's really a point where I feel like people should maybe think about selling, honestly. Either sell or grow. But there is a big decision to be made at that point.
Yeah, great advice. So Aaron, let's switch over to you're running this business, things are going well, you're growing, and you decide that a potential acquisition is the right way to go to build the business and take it to the next level. Talk a little bit about when you first started thinking that an acquisition was the way to do that, and then talk a little bit about what plans you started to put in place and what was the overall strategy that you put together to do the acquisition.
Yeah. So we started working with the company that we acquired a few years ago. And once we started working with them, we realized the opportunity in the telecom and utility industry. There's just a lot of money to save clients out there. And we worked with them for about a year and had a few really good accounts that we were splitting with the company we were partnering with, the company we ended up acquiring. And so when you start chopping the pie up and you see the opportunity long term, it makes it attractive to want to acquire that strategic partner versus continuing that strategic partnership forever. Furthermore, we offer obviously waste and recycling consulting services. Before we did the acquisition, that was just our piece, whereas the telecom and the utility piece was the company we were partnering with at the time. And we thought there was a big opportunity to roll out the waste consulting piece to that strategic partner and their network of affiliates that were bringing in deals around the country. The problem was, again, we would have to chop the pie up so many ways. It was impossible to roll that out. It just wasn't attractive enough to do that between the parties. And the only way to really implement that would have been to make this acquisition. So there was several kind of almost arbitrage pieces in place there that made it an attractive decision to pursue the acquisition. And really, we were at at North Carolina at the office of the company we ended up acquiring, working with them, and it just all started to kind of dawn on me that we needed to pursue this. And I talked over with the partners, and we were kind of wondering if the seller who ended up selling would be interested, and we approached him and kind of went from there.
And was he receptive to the idea at first?
He was. I mean, this was honestly his first acquisition. I've ran several businesses, and Colby, my partner, one of my partners, he'd been in the mergers and acquisitions industry, but neither of us and none of us on the team had ever approached another business owner about selling. But it wasn't, it's not as, I guess, not as hard in some ways as it sounds. We just basically asked, hey, would you be interested in selling? I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And I really kind of communicated the vision that I wanted for us working together, and kind of kept it simple. And he was interested. I think he'd actually even had a premonition that 2018 might be the year that he would sell his business, and he knew that it would always have to be from somebody that he was already kind of strategically aligned with, because it's not necessarily a business that everybody is out there looking to acquire.
So, could you share a little bit about what your vision was? So, what was the vision that you articulated to him, and how did that match up to what his objectives were?
Yeah, well, at the time he didn't have any of his children involved in the business, and so I knew the legacy of the industry was really important to him. He'd been doing it since 1991, and he was really successful and really passionate about saving businesses money on these expense categories and the expertise and the help that they provided. And I just let him know that our goals were aligned there. We want to carry on that legacy and expand on it, and make sure that as many people around the country get the services that they need in this regard. And then furthermore, I mean, he wasn't super old, but I knew at some point he had to be looking at an exit strategy. And he really enjoys business development and the sales side of the business, and that's what he's good at. But whereas actually running the day to day, doing the finances, the payroll, the HR, all that sort of stuff that a lot of business owners struggle with, we knew that wasn't his strength nor what he enjoyed doing. So I really just communicated the fact that, one, we're going to expand on your legacy. Two, we can work this deal to where you can get back to doing business development and continue to earn some revenue there, and really just have it become more of a, eventually more of a lifestyle for him, that he can also see his legacy carry on, and still make a nice chunk of change on the sale as well.
And has he stayed on after the acquisition?
He's an active role. He's one of the executive officers in the company right now, and the co-founder of the business, obviously. And he stayed on. He's actually become a franchisee himself, and he handles right now all the franchise support and training. So people get to learn from somebody that really knows their way around the industry. And I don't know. I mean, we don't know how long he'll stay on. Hopefully, a long time, because he's really good. But if he wants to just become or do the franchise stuff completely, that's totally fine too. But it's been a really great transition, and yeah, couldn't have planned it any better.
That's awesome. You just talked about something that's so important. You went in articulating your vision, but you also went in knowing what was important to that owner, that they cared about their legacy. They didn't want to see what they built just go away, and you went in a respectful way, communicating that. And I tell people this all the time, and for the folks listening today, this is so important. If you're going in to make an acquisition, you have to put yourself in the seat of that owner, and understand what's important to them. What's their motivation for selling? And sure, everybody wants to get the highest dollars, but there are so many other things that are important. And legacy is typically one of those things that matters. And so, articulating to the owner of a business how you're going to carry on their legacy is going to resonate with them. And so, it's really important to pay attention to that. Really key takeaway there. Let's talk about the actual transaction now. So you approach the owner, he's interested. What transpired from there? How did the deal unfold? And then how did you ultimately get to a point where you all could agree on price and terms? And were there any advisors involved in along the way?
Sure. Yeah, it was actually a pretty interesting process. And that was mainly because it was our first time doing it and we didn't have any advisors. We didn't have any business brokers doing it. And that's one thing that I've learned as a result of doing this, that I would absolutely employ the help of a broker the next time we did it or do it. And that's for a lot of reasons we'll get to, but we did it ourselves. And so we really just, again, Colby had a lot of experience actually crunching numbers and doing the EBITDA and the multiples and all the stuff that go into kind of figuring out what a fair price should be. So he had experience in that regard. But as far as like the massaging the deal and working through those delicate questions and problems that can come up, we had to handle those head on directly with the seller, which I think is an area that the business broker can really bring a ton of value, because that got difficult at times. But from the get go, we really just try to keep it conversational and say, okay, well, how much is the business doing? We had to get profitability numbers, sign a non-disclosure agreement, get all the numbers that we could before we could make an offer. And then we made an offer and went back and forth quite a few times and eventually settled on a number, and then went through a further due diligence phase from there.
Was it hard to get to agreement on the number? Was there a fair amount of back and forth there? And talk a little bit about, getting on the same page in regards to the numbers.
Um, yeah, I mean, we made an initial offer, and I don't think we were too far off in what the final offer was. We just really looked at the seller's discretionary earnings and then factored in what we would have to pay this particular person to help run the business to get to kind of a true net number, and then just thought about what multiple we thought was fair of that number to pay, and really just based on what we thought was fair. I mean, we didn't have a lot of comps, honestly, with a business. It wasn't a huge business. It was between, obviously, it was between 1 and 2 million on the acquisition side. So even paying a multiple, I don't know if many acquisitions are based on a multiple at that size, but we felt comfortable with it. We thought there was a lot of opportunity, and so that's what we went forward with. And we ended up pretty close to the number that we started with.
And did the owner have anybody advising them? Yeah, how did they get comfortable with the numbers that you were throwing out?
Well, they had just a business attorney, I think, that had done several mergers and acquisitions, but I don't think, certainly not a broker or anybody like that.
So was that attorney was adept at mergers and acquisitions and had a sense for transactions in this industry? So sounds like they were able to provide some guidance at least.
Honestly, I haven't talked to the seller about that specifics. I know from my understanding, it was really just more of an attorney. Like, he knew how to put the paperwork together and how to
Mm.
how to do an asset sale, or et cetera, et cetera. I don't think he had any experience valuing businesses in this niche by any means. So this was really just a deal where I think it honestly would have been hard to find a lot of comparables or comps, and we just had to come up with a price that we all thought was fair, just old fashioned free market
All
style.
right. Well, you got there. You got to agreement.
Yeah.
Great. Then you mentioned you did hit some speed bumps on. It sounds like maybe issues that were unrelated to price that got a little sticky. Can you talk a little bit about that? And in what phase did those issues start to pop up?
Yeah. I mean, it was, as far as what phase, is probably halfway through. I mean, once we agreed on a price, we always had talked from the beginning to set the expectation that some of this was going to be upfront and some of it was going to be in an earn out. I wasn't, we all weren't comfortable paying 100% of the price up front. And I wouldn't recommend anybody do that. We ended up paying a pretty fair, I think, portion up front. Probably about 70% of the money was up front. The rest was structured in an earn out over several years. And the sticking points really were trying to figure out how to structure that earn out to where it was fair and measurable, because little nuances and little words and descriptions in a contract can cause major issues down the road. And fortunately, the seller was very astute and worked with us directly to make sure that we didn't have any misunderstandings down the road. So going back and forth and trying to define that to where it was fair for everybody was a big deal and took some time. Also, clearly he was very concerned about his employees, and as he should be. They were great employees, and we wanted to make them comfortable and retain them. So we talked a lot about that and how to structure that. And then The last thing was the employment agreement. He was going to stay on running the office and in an executive position. So we had to talk about what those duties were and what that looked like and salary, et cetera, et cetera. So it took a while to work through all those numbers, but we got there.
And so were you doing that directly with the owner? Were you having those, or was that between attorney and attorney? Because my experience is that when the principals have to have those sorts of conversations, it can get very uncomfortable, and the goodwill that gets built up early on in a transaction can quickly evaporate if people are at odds on some of those terms. And like you said, some,
Hmm.
the devil's in the details, especially when it comes to earnouts. And for folks
Sure.
in the M&A community who are not familiar with earnouts, and earnout is basically a portion of the sale price that's paid in the future based on something happening, some milestone being achieved, some revenue number being achieved, retention of client. It could be on any number of things, but the payment essentially is something that's going to come in the future. And earnouts are fraught with a lot of challenges because if they're not worded properly, you could wind up with some significant litigation issues later on and disputes, and you want to avoid those. So they're not the easiest of instruments to negotiate. So, Aaron, back to the question, which was, you had these negotiations directly or through attorneys, and how sticky did it get?
Yeah, we had those negotiations literally just directly one on one with the seller and my CFO. So you're right. It did get a little difficult and awkward at times, and that's one reason I would recommend everybody to employ a business broker, because that level of insulation that you have between buyer and seller really helps keep that the warm and fuzzies and the goodwill intact. We didn't lose that. We have really good people on both sides of this transaction, so it wasn't an issue ultimately, but there were certainly sticking points along the way, and you could just feel the awkwardness or the tension that didn't have to be there if we had used a third party intermediary. So I definitely learned the value of that. Not to just plug your industry, but I think there's a reason it exists and it's really valuable. We had to do it all head on and try to get it just to where it was fair for everybody. And we ended up getting there, but it took a lot longer than it probably needed to, and it probably wasn't as easy as it needed to. It certainly felt like a roller coaster at times, probably for both sides of the transaction, where it was kind of deal on, deal off type mindset. But it ended up working out great. And I think I would tell people two, like, one, first hire a business broker. Two, just make sure the people that you're acquiring are going into business with are good people, because you're going to make so many mistakes. It's not even funny. And at the end of the day, if you can fall back on the fact that you truly are acquiring a good business with good people behind it, it's going to gloss over 90% of those mistakes.
Without a doubt. Yeah, and yeah, certainly we don't want this to be a commercial about us, but I tell people, and it's not just, firms like ours, it's having good advisors across the board, M&A accountants, M&A attorneys, people who really understand transactions is so critical. So the broader point is well taken. So, Aaron, anything else in the diligence phase or in the closing phase that you think were key takeaways that you'd like to share? And if not, then what I'd like to do is move to post-closing integration and merging the two together, and the challenges and opportunities with all of that.
Yeah, and I think we can move on. If I think of something, I'll add to it later.
So let's talk about integration. How did it go? What were the unexpected challenges, and what were maybe some of the unexpected advantages and things that you hadn't seen that worked out well for you?
Yeah, and it was definitely it's been an interesting process and a learning process over the last, I guess it's been 15 months now since we completed the transaction. And anytime looking back on it, when you're buying a business and spending a lot of money, you can do all the due diligence that you want, and you can have worked with these people for years, but there's still clearly a lot of risk involved, and a lot of, you just kind of have to hold your nose and go for it once you've done all you can as far as your due diligence is concerned. So once we pulled the trigger and did the transaction, we really kind of got in there and started working on the integration. And the biggest thing that I learned, as far as, and I wouldn't say negative, but just difficulty, is the systems differences between the organizations. I didn't really have a full appreciation for how big of a deal that can be. And the company we acquired had really great systems in place, but they were systems that weren't going to scale or work with multiple offices, multiple services, multiple franchisees, et cetera. So we had to really get in there and, I don't want to say modernize, but a lot of ways we did. And that took a long time. And every little change that you bestow upon employees is hard, regardless of how small it is and regardless of how easy you think it is. So as little as you can do there, the better, but you still obviously have to make those changes in order to move forward. So that's been very eye-opening for me. I don't want to say difficult. I think it's been difficult on the employees at times and stressful, but they've had a great attitude and they've done really well. And I think that goes back to point number one: make sure you're buying a business with good people, because the wheels can fall off in a number of ways. And if you have a shady seller or just bad character anywhere in the organization, it's not going to go well. So that was a big thing that I noticed, was the systems and just the little changes can really wear on people, and you just got to be careful there. So, and then as far as, well, let's see, net positive, I think it was just the people involved. I mean, the culture was great. Everybody's positive. They all work hard. We didn't have any slackers. Again, we got lucky. Really, we have good people. So that definitely made everything easier for us.
Were you able to keep most of the folks in the acquisition?
We did. We retained everybody post acquisition, and we made that a priority. In fact, in the deal itself, we made sure that the seller knew that this was part of it. We needed to retain the employees, and we talked to the employees directly very quickly after it was official and told them how important they were and how we wanted to keep them, and even put some financial carrots out there to make sure that they stayed on board. And I think that's really just about communication and making sure people know that, hey, nothing's going to change as far as your job's concerned. We want you to be here. Really making sure they're comfortable with that.
And that's the right way to handle that. And I tell people all the time, people are so important in these trades. They're probably the most important. Clients are important without a doubt, and the service and the product is important. But the people that have the knowledge and have been there and doing it, making sure that they are taken care of and come along, it really ensures the success of any acquisition or merger. So Aaron, let's see if we can wrap this all up now. So you make the acquisition, you've got some challenges in integration, you've got some time now behind you. Is the original vision that you had laid out starting to come to fruition for you?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the company that we acquired had an affiliate program that they'd been doing for a decade, bringing in affiliates all over the country to expand on the business model so they could go out and market to more businesses. And then our company now would provide the back end expertise to actually deliver on those results. So that was a great model, and it worked out really well for the seller for a while and helped him grow, but it wasn't scalable long term, just for multiple operational reasons. And the vision that we had, and we discussed this with the seller even during the transaction, was that we wanted to franchise the concept, bring it all under one brand, and grow it from there. And we've been moving forward on that since day one, and we franchised at the end of 2018, and we've got 6 franchisees to date, and really looking to grow from there. Hopefully, several hundred over the next several years. So
Oh,
it's
congratulations.
yeah, thanks. It's working out. So we've gotten really lucky.
That's great. That's great. And it sounds like potentially that there may be some other acquisitions in your future. You referenced it there earlier. And so tell me and tell the M&A Unplugged community, if you were to go down this path a second time, what key learnings or if you were to take one big thing, one big takeaway that you could share with everybody else and something that you'll use in future acquisitions, what would that be?
Well, I think we're absolutely interested in future acquisitions. There's plenty of cost reduction categories out there where we're actively looking at acquiring expertise in to help our franchisees and affiliates be able to make more money. So that's definitely one of the areas that we're looking to do acquisitions in. And I think the takeaway that I have is that we'll employ the services of a business broker. We have my CFO's capable and does really well, and more than capable, as far as valuing businesses and understanding the finances. But as far as that insulation between buyer and seller and just going out there and sourcing the deal, that's an entire industry and career in and of itself. And we don't need to try to do that again. That was a good learning process, but I would definitely recommend that people don't try to go it alone. It's not worth it. So that would be my key takeaway.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And congratulations on having a successful transaction, getting through the integration, and now, fulfilling and seeing your vision come to fruition. One last question before I ask you to share your contact details. Any favorite business books that you've read? And it doesn't have to be recently, at any point in time, that really left an impression on you? And it does. And then, by the way, it doesn't need to be a business book, but any book that you've read that's left a big impression on you.
Sure. Yeah, I've actually got a couple things I'll leave your audience with here. One, I'm sure everybody's heard of. At least most people that do business have read this book. But the book "How to Win Friends and Influence People" by Dale Carnegie, I think, is one of the best books ever written. It's also one of the worst titles ever written. You feel like a kind of a loser reading that in public. People think you might not have friends, but it's an amazing book, and I try to read it once a year just to help me continue to deal with people in my life, whether it be employees or friends, and be a good person and a good human being. And there's just so many amazing lessons in that book, and I think it's really reading number one for anybody, and certainly business executives and employees. And then the second thing I would like to tell people is I really enjoy the podcast Built to Sell. It's Built to Sell Radio. You might be familiar with it. And I think there's just really a dearth of information out there, if that's the right word, on the acquisition front, both buying and selling. So your podcast is really doing a great service to people. And the Built to Sell Radio, those podcasts are very interesting because they're almost all from the seller side. And it's fascinating to hear all the different reasons why people look to sell. They also get into really, really good detail about why they structured an earnout, how they structured an earnout, how it worked out post transaction. So you can really hear the emotions that the sellers have and understand what they're going through and what they're going to go through, both during the transaction and post transaction. And I think listening to that and just understanding that really will lend itself to helping you have a better outcome on your deal.
That's awesome advice. So funny you mentioned how to win friends and influence people. I was just a guest on a podcast, Breakaway Wealth, and they asked the same question. And that was the book that I gave. I read that on my 24th birthday, and I've always told people that 24 was the birthday that had effect on me more than anything else. I've never had a birthday that's had any sort of impact on me other than 24. I happened to
Nice.
read that book on my 24th birthday, cover to cover, and it changed the trajectory of my life at that point in time, and went on to do some different things, and it changed everything. So I
Very
always
cool.
recommend that book.
Yeah, very cool.
Aaron, thank you so much for being our guest today. If folks would like to get in touch with you in regards to P3, maybe becoming a franchisee, or just in general, maybe they want to get in touch with you to understand about cost reduction more, how can they reach you?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to just be to fire me an email at aaron@costanalyst.com. So AARON at costanalyst with an S.com. I'm not big on the Twitter or anything else. That's probably just the easiest way to get me.
Got it. All right. Thank you so much. So for the M&A Unplugged community, let me summarize a few of the key takeaways that Aaron shared with us today. One was, if you noticed, he talked about having a vision before he went into his acquisition. We talk about this with all of our clients. So important to have your vision and strategy. What do you want to accomplish? I read an article this morning about Amazon and Jeff Bezos and how he makes all of his folks write a press release into the future, well into the future, about an initiative or a business or whatever they want to do, and write that press release as though it's been a success. And I think this very much falls in line. You need to know what your end game is before you undertake a potential acquisition. He also talked about you really understanding the seller's motivations and taking care with their legacy. They've built this business over many years, And if they're not passing it on to the next generation, that really matters to people. They want to know that their company, their clients, their employees are going to be taken care of. And if you go in, understanding that and communicating that to owners, you're going to build the goodwill that's so necessary in getting transactions done. I also mentioned how difficult it is to negotiate directly with owners and having intermediaries in the middle to sort of shield and buffer what can happen in a negotiation, because we've seen some where that's happened and the deals have fallen apart because the issues have gotten so sticky. It's eroded all the goodwill, and now there's not a transaction to be done. Aaron also talked a little bit about integration and some surprises that he was hit with. We tell folks the time to start planning your integration is the day you decide that you're going to make an acquisition. Start thinking through what are all of the integration issues that are going to come up? What are the phases of integration? Do you have the internal resources to handle integration, or do you need to bring in external expertise to help you along the way? And then the last key takeaway that Aaron shared, and I can't stress how important this is, and it's the people. People, in my view, are the most important asset that you're acquiring when you acquire a business. And that's not to diminish the value of clients and the product or the service that's been built, but people make it tick. And unless you have a plan for the people and you take care of the people, the value of your acquisition is going to decrease. So really have a good, solid plan around the people. I want to thank Aaron again for being a guest on today's show. All of today's information will be available in the show notes. If you would like to learn more about the process of acquiring or selling a business, please visit us at our website at sunacquisitions.com, or feel free to reach out to me at drinaldi@sunacquisitions.com. I look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of the M&A Unplugged podcast. And until then, please remember that scaling, acquiring, or selling a business takes time, preparation, and the proper knowledge.
Thank you for joining us today on M&A Unplugged. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and recommend it wherever you get your podcasts. If you want more great information on how to scale, acquire, or sell a business, please visit our website at sunacquisitions.com.